The following presentation is controversial and may be offensive to some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Radio from the heart of America now.
America is back, standing tall, standing tall.
Ronald Reagan was the one who said that we are a shining city on a hill. We slid down the side of that hill.
I would like to take all the credit for this.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
And now, the Commander-in-Chief is back. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio.
All right, welcome back, Gulf Coast, and welcome back, America. We're so glad that you're with us from sea to shining sea, coast to coast, and around the world. We welcome our listeners, and of course, you are in the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio, and we are broadcasting live today. 1330 WEBY, 25,000 watts of broadcasting power. We broadcast to portions of 4 states on the Gulf Coast just on this radio station, but of course, we stream live over the internet and on your smartphones. We podcast this show, and all of this is connected to the PNN News Ministry Network on the internet and all of the Facebook accounts and Twitter accounts and blog spots and syndicated blogs and other websites and other people that feature us. So, by the time we do that and we do this live show and we make video posts of portions of this live show and plaster them all over YouTube on our viral YouTube channel where we already have like 60 or 70 million views, 60,000, 70,000 subscribers. Well, you can imagine that by the end of the week, we've got 1 million or more folks that are listening to us all over the world, and we love that. We've got a lot of listeners from across the big pond every week. I like to give a shout-out to those, particularly those in Israel, because of our affiliation with Zev Parat and Messiah of Israel Ministries over the years. We've amassed a huge audience through his ministry, and then a lot of other people through word of mouth there. And then, of course, we've had other callers and visitors and guests on who hail from Europe that tell us we have quite a large live listening audience from Europe. But remember, you can get podcasts of all of this no matter where you are listening from or want to listen from. You can get them at carlgallups.com. Don't forget, go to carlgallups.com. Tomorrow afternoon, you can download the podcast of this entire show and, repost it for us if you want and use it and listen to it. Have a good time with it. There's so much else you can do at carlgallups.com. You can be there for hours watching videos and reading articles and ministry, PNN News and Ministry Network, Freedom Friday radio show stuff. It's all there. Plus, you can listen live to this program at carlgallups.com. Don't forget, you can do some live feedback with us during the show at freedomfriday.carlgallups on Facebook, freedomfriday.carlgallups. All right. Well, my first guest is Susan Knowles. I count her as a dear friend of mine. I've been on her radio program before, and now today she's going to be on this radio program in the Oval Office. She is a licensed psychotherapist. She's a former practicing family law attorney. She's a conservative talk radio host, personality. She's an author. She contributes to The Blaze online and also WND.com. Some of you are saying, well, that's where I know the name. Of course, Susan Knowles. Now, Susan's shows can be found on Spreaker.com on the internet. Spreaker, 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 not speaker, but Spreaker.com. Just go there, type in Susan Knowles, or the name of her program is Stand for Truth Radio. Type either of those in, and you can follow her shows there. Her website is susanknowles.com. You can follow her on Twitter at Susan Knowles. And Knowles is spelled Knowles. Susan Knowles. Also at our live Facebook site right now, freedomfriday.carlgallups on Facebook. I've got her website already there. It's posted so you can get it. But anyway, Oval Office today. Thanks for coming on Freedom Friday.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. My pleasure to coming on. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure, and I certainly have enjoyed the times we've been together on your radio show. You've been so gracious to me over the years, and I've been meaning to do this for a long time, so please forgive me, Susan, but I'm glad you're here today.
Me too. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, well, listen, I just said to you off air just very quickly, but let's go ahead and chat about it on air. This has got to be, in my lifetime, this is, I guess, the most important presidential election and the strangest high-drama election in my lifetime. And listen, in my opinion, and you're free to have different opinions than mine, of course, Susan, as always, and even though it's, this show together, but please, if you have different opinions, say them. But in my opinion, this might be the most important presidential election in the history of our nation, maybe with the exception of the very first one and maybe the Civil War, but I also factor in the prophetic times in which we're living factor, and when you factor all that in, this may be the most important presidential election in our lifetime. What do you think about all that mouthful I just said?
Well, I certainly think this is one of the most controversial elections that we will probably ever see in our lifetime. And I think people are watching this very closely. I think it is a matter of you're on one side or the other. And there's no in between. There's really no gray area anymore, and it's going to be pretty interesting. It's already been very interesting so far.
Yeah. Well, and good gracious, I mean, it goes all the way back to the debates. It goes all the way back to the huge field that was ultimately and finally whittled down to Donald Trump. Like him, hate him, whatever. I mean, and I know he's kind of a strange presidential candidate, and by many definitions of the word, but there he is, and there's the Hildebeest on the other side. I mean, bless her heart, I think she's falling apart physically, and I don't wish that on anybody. But by the same token, that's a huge factor. So you got all of that. Now today, just announced that Ted Cruz is going to endorse Donald Trump, and I think that's cool. I think that's a classy act on the part of Ted Cruz, but in the meantime, I know a lot of people don't like it because Cruz and Trump went at it throat to throat during the primaries. What's your analysis of all of that?
Well, I just wish that in the very beginning that things had been different. Donald Trump now is coming around and becoming very presidential, and I think that's due a lot to Roger Ailes. I wish he had just done that in the very beginning, and all of the drama would have just been done away with. Maybe we would have even had Ted as a vice presidential candidate. I don't know. I mean, but we'll never know. And today he did endorse Donald Trump.
Yeah, I know. And a lot of people thought that early on when it looked like Trump might win the primary. They were the same thing. They were saying it would be really great if maybe Ted Cruz could be the vice presidential candidate, but the two of them just ate each other's lunch. And I don't know, Susan, I'm not a political expert, a political advisor expert, but it just seems to me in the same party, that there ought to be some kind of rule about tearing each other to shreds personally in the primary, because then you wind up with this mess we've had this time. It's the worst I've ever seen.
Yeah, I don't think it does anything at all good to serve our party. It never does. It made the GOP look horrible. I think we lost a lot of support during that time for people who were trying to decide where to go, either with Hillary or Bernie at that point. And it didn't make us look good. It makes us look small. And I think that's something that we really need in the future to look at and just stop. It's childish behavior. Yeah.
Well, listen, do you have any, we're just guessing now. Do you have any, I want to ask you, do you have any prognostications about two things about the presidential election? Number one, how do you think this is all going to shake out in the end, Hillary or Trump, and why? And then number two, you would just be speculating, and me too, but what do you think might happen if Hillary had to drop out, or God forbid she didn't live till November? I'm not being funny when I say that. there are medical doctors out there on the internet saying, look, from what we're seeing, she may not live a few more months. But who do you think is going to win it, all things being equal, if Hillary, continues to pull off her health and everything? And then number two, what do you think would happen if she had to drop out for whatever reason?
I think that Trump has a pretty good chance of winning, especially now that he's looking more presidential. He's not flip-flopping, going back and forth every day, something new. He's sort of found his niche and his path, and he's moving forward on that. And so I think he has a really good chance. Some of the polls have him behind a little bit, but I think right now Hillary's supposed to be ahead 6 points, or you never know. I don't trust those, so I think that Trump is doing really well, and I think the support that they claim that he's not getting, I think he really is getting. I think people are getting behind him, and they're starting to look at her and saying, there is something wrong with her, or though it appears that there's something wrong with her. Her health is horrible. We have doctors now that are coming out and saying, there's something obviously wrong. A surgeon just came out the other day and said, with her eyes, she was giving a speech, I believe it was in Philadelphia, and her eyes were not moving together. One was going one way and one the other. And people are saying that maybe from that concussion she had, there's something wrong. They're asking her to take neurological tests, and of course she's saying, no, I'm not going to do it. And if she is elected, I think people have to really start looking and say, do I want a President Kane?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's right, because if she is elected, I don't see how she can hold out for 4 years.
No, I really don't either. Her health appears to be that bad, and if we go back and we look at 9/11 when she was at the memorial service, that was really shocking, what we saw.
Yes, it
was. And I think that a lot of people are looking at that and saying there's definitely something wrong, and it may be chronic.
Yeah, it was shocking, and it was sad. And listen, I don't like the woman's politics. I started to say I don't like the woman. I don't know the woman. She might be fine to sit down and talk to, but I've studied her history as a radio host for years, and I don't like her politics. I don't think I would like her even as a person just sitting down with her. But when I saw that on 9/11, I went, oh, it was so sad. She stood there and she was just out of it, and she took one step and looked like a robot, and she stumbled and fell, and how undignified, how humiliating, and people had to pick her up and kind of throw her into the van. It was horrible. I just cringed.
Yeah, it was really bad, and she looked very catatonic. She was very stiff, and she didn't move, and that, to me, that is not a typical fainting spell that they were trying to say that she had. Right. I'm not a doctor that can say that, but I'm just saying it looked very odd to me, and something a little bit more than what we were being told.
Right. Well, I know that you are a former practicing family law attorney, but you're also a licensed psychotherapist. I'm not going to ask you to do any psychotherapy analysis on our candidates, but I bet you're having a field day with what you know and what you're seeing out of all of the candidates, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. You could just, people are talking to me about it, saying, I don't understand this, I don't understand. And I'm trying to explain some of the things that I think are occurring, and it's sometimes you just don't even know.
I know. Well, I spent 10 years in law enforcement and investigations, and and then 30 years in the ministry dealing with the deep, dark secrets that people carry around and dealing with their spiritual side and their psychological side. I'm not trying to say that I play a psychotherapist on TV, but I did sleep in Holiday Inn last night, Susan. So maybe. But I'm just saying, from my 40 years of life experience in law enforcement and ministry, I too see a lot of the same things you see. Probably, obviously not at the same academic level that you do, but it's a little frightening. I don't mind telling you.
It is.
Yeah.
It is a little frightening all the way around.
Yeah. But anyway, hey, but you mentioned we've got to take a break. But before we do, I just speak very quickly about this. How do you rationalize, along with me and many others? So the polls show them neck and neck, and or Hillary up ahead. Yet Donald Trump walks into a city and gathers 20, 30,000 people. She walks into a city and there's 200, 300. There's more people at a high school play than there are at Hillary Clinton rallies. And yet the polls say, oh, they're neck and neck. She may win it. How is that, Susan? How can that be?
Well, I hate to be so blunt, but it appears that somebody's lying here, right?
Well, thank you. Thank you. Either that or I'm going crazy. I've tried to, and there's no way to explain it. Not that big. If he had 600 people and she had 300, you could say, okay, I get it. But 30,000 to 300? There's something's wrong here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll talk more. We've got so much more to talk about, and I look forward to it. So we'll be back in a moment after this timeout. You are in the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio. My guest this afternoon, Susan Knowles, licensed psychotherapist, former practicing family law attorney, host, writer for The Blaze, WND. She's got a book. It's called Freedom's Flight, A Call to Remember. You can find it at Amazon. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Hey, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this brief timeout.
Welcome back to Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups. Sit down, buckle up, and hang on.
All right. Well, I hope you're sitting down. I hope you're buckled up. Maybe got a cup of coffee, something like that. Just hang on. We're going to have a good time because my guest right now is Susan Knowles. She's a licensed psychotherapist, a former practicing family law attorney, conservative talk radio host. She writes for The Blaze and WND, and she's the host of her own conservative radio show. It's called Stand for Truth Radio. Susan Knowles, Stand for Truth Radio. Just go to Spreaker.com. Put her name there, and you can follow her show there as well. Also, Susan, you have a book. It's a political fiction book. It's called Freedom's Fight. I think I might have said flight before we went off just a moment ago, but it's Freedom's Fight, A Call to Remember, and it's on Amazon. So tell us, tell folks where they can find you, your website, again, how to listen to your radio program and or get the podcast. Tell us about your book. Tell us what it's about. Let's talk about you for a little bit. Susan Knowles, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. You can just find me easily at SusanKnowles.com, SusanKnowles.com, and you can click on everything there. It will take you to Spreaker. I'm also on SoundCloud, iTunes, just about everywhere you want to go, and you'll find me there. My book, I wrote that a couple of years back before the world started becoming so upside down, and the book was intended to be a fiction, but I'm sorry to say in a lot of respects that it's come true. And that is, how do we survive and how do we deal in a world that we don't recognize anymore? And it's a fiction, but like I said, a lot of things are coming true.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm going to order that book. I'm looking forward to reading it. I am an avid reader. It sounds interesting, and you are a tremendous writer. I read your stuff all the time at The Blaze and at WND. And of course, I've been on your radio program. I know what an awesome radio host you are, and now my audience knows you and knows how awesome you are. So I look forward to that. Freedom's Fight, A Call to Remember. Okay, fantastic. Well, listen, Susan, let's talk for just a moment. We've only got about 5 or 6 minutes, so let me just kind of throw it out and you talk about it. But so Charlotte, Tulsa, all of the the racial discord and tension and the rioting, and I mean, I was a cop for years. I understand how all that happens. I get it, but one of the things that's in the headlines right now is that in Charlotte, 70% of the arrests, they're getting running IDs on these people and finding out they're all from out of state. They're not even from just out of town. They're from out of state. They're being shipped in, bussed in. Somebody's paying these thugs to come in. In other words, if you took 70% of the rioters out of the picture, probably most of the other 30% wouldn't be there either, Susan.
I know, it's such a shame. I grew up in North Carolina. I'm in California now, but I grew up there, and it's so sad to see all of this happening. When you get people like Black Lives Matter, they come out and they say, we're here to help you. We're going to help the black community.
Yeah, right.
And what they're doing is they're helping themselves. They're getting money from George Soros. They've got like $30 million from him, $100 million over the next 6 years from other progressive groups. And those are the people that are out there on the street. It's not the people of North Carolina who are out there rioting and looting. Yeah. It's those people that are brought in doing it.
Right. I know, and that's the thing that... Susan, I don't know. I mean, we could talk for another hour on this, but and I'm not laying it all at Obama's feet, but this guy is the most divisive, whichever way you want to use that word, president in my lifetime. I mean, most presidents at least take a jab at unifying the nation around certain Americana principles. But this guy, gosh, it seems like every time he turns around, he takes the side of some group that's going to stir up trouble. I mean, it's like he's just like a thug, a street thug. You may disagree, but that's my opinion.
No, I don't disagree at all. I think he has an agenda. I think it's a very progressive agenda. And I think he wants to divide and create chaos because in order to do that, and that's what elitists do. That's how they stay in control. And that's exactly what we see happening right now. And he is a part of that. He has caused a lot of it. And it's a shame that people before were getting along well with each other and they were trying to embrace each other. And they're not doing that now, largely in part because of him. Yeah. But I also want people to know it's not everybody who believes what he's saying, and not everybody is participating in it.
Right.
There's just a few.
Right. No, that's an important point to make. Listen, turning to Tulsa, so, the DA has filed first-degree manslaughter charges. So, I mean, you're a former attorney. I mean, I'm a former cop. I kind of cringed when I saw that. Now, look, if it turns out that the cop, needs to be charged with that, hey, I'm all for justice. I am, and I know you are too. But wasn't that a bit premature? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we're seeing what we saw in Baltimore, where we had a state's attorney who came out and said, hey, this is for you, and made this more something that was being fought in the public arena. And that's exactly what we're doing again. I think, maybe charges needed to be brought, but did they have to be brought so soon before we had more evidence? And I think it's just to appease people, which is what happened in Baltimore. And then as we know that all of the charges were finally dropped from people, or, there was nothing there, basically. And who knows if we're going to find that or not? I don't know.
Yeah, well, one day soon we will. We shall see. Anyway, Susan Tymas, I am going to have you back, and I look forward to it. Tell people
Thanks,
very
Carl.
quickly one more time where they can find you. Tell them the name of your book, your website, etc. Tell them how they can get you.
SusanKnowles.com, Freedom's Fight, A Call to Remember on Amazon, or find me on Spreaker.com. Type in Susan Knowles.
Okay, fantastic. Susan Knowles, thanks for being in the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
God bless you, Susan. All right, folks.
God bless.
Folks, God bless you as well. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Listen, we've got another hour and a half of a great show. It's going to go by quickly, so don't go anywhere.